So the last gameplay discussion I did was back in 2021, and in that video, it sort of marked the end for this style of content, or at least the beginning of a very long break from it. And after some consideration, I decided to bring back these gameplay discussions, however, in a more tapered measure this time around, trying to deliver these at a pace of around once a month. So as I ease back into these more discussion-oriented videos, I'd appreciate your viewership as always, guys, and I hope that you find this content at least intellectually stimulating to watch. So with that out of the way, my first topic to return to this style of content is regarding physical media consumption, and really to share how I believe this war between physical versus digital is really sort of missing the point. And in a surprise turn, I'm actually going to defend digital media because, in actuality, it's really not the enemy of physical media, nor is it the vehicle that will destroy it entirely. Now, as many of you know, I consider myself an avid game collector. I collect physical games for games that I have interest in and ones that I actually will play. And I've spoken about this before, but I'm really not a fan of those who like to collect for the sake of collecting without any real objective or plan to play any of those games in any capacity. And I think that this has unfortunately plagued the YouTube gaming collection bubble for quite some time. Often I see people on here who enjoy making content and also acting as an authority on the hobby, but don't actually partake in the hobby itself. And I've long advocated that at the very least, achievements and trophies are good for this because they showcase you actual telemetry that's factual. And whether it be how many people played the game and completed it, or perhaps gave up halfway through, you can't argue with a trophy or achievement system. It just shows you the data as it is. But that's getting sidetracked. The point is that I will always choose physical over digital for reasons regarding flexibility of ownership. And if a game is releasing day and date but has a physical copy for the same price, then you simply get more freedom with the game disc, and the ability to also make some type of return that you otherwise normally get with digital is a nice bonus. Again, I'm just showing my preference here for why I make that decision. Whether or not you personally care about that is up to you. But I think it's also worth considering that many publishers make more money off of you in a digital sale versus a physical one. With digital games, there's no production costs associated with the product, there's no shortage of stock, no retailer besides really the digital storefronts, but often it's cheaper to release a game digitally than it is physically, yet we see no price difference reflected back to the consumer when it comes to the publishers saving the cost themselves. So annoyingly, we are paying the same price for these games, but the publishers are making more per sale for each game while also reducing the amount of buyer's freedom we get with a digital product. Now, all of this is pretty standard stuff, and I think if we look at history, one thing could be absolutely clear, and it's that people will give up whatever they need to in order to have the slightest bit of convenience. No matter what it is, we saw that with streaming, we'll likely see that with the automotive industry as well as we move into self-driving cars and AI. And we're certainly seeing it right now with video games. You know, it's a slow transition, but regardless of what happens there, I still don't really foresee physical games going away completely. Despite what many people try to say online, I think that what we'll likely see is more of a adoption of the same principles that the movie industry has taken with their films. And it's a very interesting comparison to make because despite the overwhelming majority of people preferring to watch movies via streaming, discs are still being produced. And there's a larger argument against streaming for films because there's actually a massive quality difference when it comes to 4K Netflix streams and that of a 4K Blu-ray. Yet Blu-ray films are still being produced despite this, and they're even still producing DVDs as well, which actually make up the majority of physical movie sales most of the time with releases. So it's often kind of sad to think that most people who are buying physical, movies, who are investing in DVDs, are watching a 480p DVD on a 4K TV, getting this really poor picture. But at least the games at this current time don't have an issue like that, and the quality between disc and the download is the same. But I'm curious if there was a difference, and we'll likely see this as streaming gets more and more prominent with gaming. If there was a quality difference, would you care? It'll certainly be interesting to see what happens there. I think the casual market is no doubt the majority, and I'm curious to sort of see whether they'll be able to discern the quality of streaming as it improves. And certainly as it gets adopted into the mainstream, how will they feel about the quality there compared to previously downloading games or using disc? And what will they choose in the end? In any case, at the core of this topic, the main issue, why this discussion even matters to begin with, is preservation. That's what it's all about. Preservation of the art, accessibility to the IP, years, decades, and centuries down the line, access to things that you paid money for, and the flexibility to experience those things at your own leisure. This is why any of us care about this to begin with. We don't want the art to be taken away from us. We don't want anything that we paid for to just be deleted without our consent. And while some may argue the idea that, these games are old and they have no interest in playing them again, I just think that the principle that any company can willingly decide to prevent access to something that you paid money for just introduces huge complications to our rights as consumers. In any other media, this would just be completely unacceptable. And in any other industry, no one would be arguing for this. It's like, could you imagine a car company disabling your vehicle because it's old and they just simply don't support it anymore? And then you're discussing this with your neighbor and he's like, well, I don't care because I have 2 cars and I don't drive the other one anyway, so it doesn't matter to me. The concept of what I just described is unfathomable, but it's taken place in our industry today. And I'm just so confused whenever I hear people argue for this and act like it's no big deal. Like, you may not care, okay, but to act like everyone, like corporations just get free reign to just do whatever the hell they want, and that things that you paid money for can just be ripped from you and it's no big deal because it's X amount of years old is just ludicrous. In any case, I think that the real solution here, and perhaps this is the only solution, is that something needs to happen at the federal level. We need someone within the government or someone who has enough influence to create some type of government-associated organization that sort of works in an effort to preserve all forms of media and just to keep all versions of the media intact as well. Like, I know no one wants to go back and play Cyberpunk 2077 in its version 1 state, but I do think that access to it could make for very interesting content. And perhaps it could even be educational to anyone in game development, like being able to dissect what went wrong or take a closer look at the code itself and seeing exactly what was missing, how they cut corners. Ideally, all this could be digitally distributed anyway through a website, perhaps, where you could just log in. Maybe you have access to only certain things. Perhaps you need to get vetted or something where you can just sort of look at the archives and then pull the data that you need and experience it right then and there. The PC is really the only platform where that is possible, and something that's standardized, that could run on anything and grow with the consumer. That's what the PC provides. And just to be specific, only content that is delisted and inaccessible for purchasing should be stored on this site. I don't think everything needs to be stored there, right? But there are a ton of PC games delisted that are inaccessible without the disc, and great games that just may never see the light of day again. I think like Spec Ops: The Line or the Bad Company games, the earlier Need for Speed titles. These are awesome games that haven't aged poorly and are well recognized, and the idea that you could only play these titles if you have the original hardware or had purchased them before, it just blocks out a huge amount of consumers and deters them from even wanting to go back in the first place. Like if you were born around 2010 or so, you have a whole era of gaming that is just, sporadically available, stuff that you didn't even, get to experience, and it wasn't to any fault of your own. And the fact that that stuff is just inaccessible and the only way of you being able to see it is through YouTube is a bit sad. I just don't think the solution is having a bunch of people having their own personal museums in their basements with every released game for every single platform and just kind of keeping it to themselves. It should be simple, it should be accessible, it should be readily available. And I believe that until we see something that is indeed at the federal level, we'll just be in the same gray area that we've had to deal with for quite some time now. And I'll briefly tie this into a current event that's ongoing right now. It was just shared recently that in 2021, physical media sales have declined by half, and this brings the total down to 85% since 2008, which was its peak years. The problem I think many people like myself have isn't that we hate downloading games. I don't hate downloading games. I'll buy digital if it's my only choice, and if I have to, I'm certainly not going to prevent myself from playing the game if I can't buy a disc off of it. But if there was a guarantee that investments made into digital libraries were completely preserved and in my full control, I didn't have to check into a server somewhere, I wouldn't mind purchasing a digital title here and there. And certainly on PC, I've done that before, but I'll share a short story here. Do any of you guys remember a game called Crossfire X? Crossfire X was a free-to-play multiplayer shooter that had the shelf life of what felt like 9 months. But anyway, there were two story expansion campaigns for the game. These story modes were developed by Remedy, the developers of Max Payne, Control, and Alan Wake, and they are about 4 hours long each and were entirely offline and actually quite fun and enjoyable to play with the same cinematic flair that you'd come to expect from Remedy's titles. I streamed myself playing one of these campaigns back when the game first came out, and it was about a year afterwards that the game was delisted off of Xbox Live stores. It was just turned off. The multiplayer part was just disabled. And they went so far as to disable the game from being booted up on your console. And that's not even the worst part. The game also auto-deleted the story expansions off of my SSD. Like, no joke, the game went from being 12 gigabytes down to a measly 380 megabytes of storage on my console. And when I go to boot the game now, I get this error message on my console dashboard that I can't even start it. Now, this is a worst case scenario outcome, I recognize that, but it highlights that even after a $15 investment for 2 offline campaigns, which were fun and booted into a separate menu from the game itself, even that wasn't safe. Like, they couldn't just shut down the servers and disable the multiplayer portion. They actually deleted the content of the game off of everyone's consoles. And listen, regardless of whether I would replay the game or not, I think the idea that something like that can just happen, like a game could just be turned off or content can be deleted off of your console, shouldn't be a reality. But, here we are. And it highlights again that even though this is a worst case scenario, again, I want to make that clear because we were going to say it's only this one game, it still happened, and it happened so quickly that now everyone who experienced those entire experiences are just lost forever. Basically, you had to be there at launch to experience those campaigns. And I'm sure a few of you who are watching this video probably had no idea Remedy made 2 first-person shooter campaigns for a multiplayer shooter, but they did. They were fun, and they're just lost forever now. In any case, this is our reality at the moment. I hope that for the future, something could happen to resolve the instability of what we have here. And I've long since spoken about this, but I simply would never invest in a digital-only console because of the lack of consumer choice and protections like this. Now, at least on PC, I can get my games from any other storefronts. There's competition there, there's choice, but with consoles, that's seemingly impossible to do. And I think it would go against what Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo actually want to do with their platform to begin with. They want that full control, that influence of having one singular platform where you get all their stuff and it's in their ecosystem, it's in their hands, and they can profit off of that. And on PC, I just have no issue investing in these games off of Steam because even though I'm using Steam, I can still get the game off of a key shop for a much cheaper price. And that in turn drives competition to happen. And as I get older, I just see myself preserving a lot of my favorite experiences by, investing for PC copies of these games digitally. And due to the nature of choice and accessibility as well, you have protections there. Perhaps that is a separate video for a different time, but let me know if you guys like the return of this style of content. I know it's been a very long time since I did a discussion like this. I make content very differently now compared to how I did when I was making these videos before, and I'm just curious to hear what you guys think. You'll start to see these videos crop up again as we start to move into the new year, and in any case, thank you guys very much for watching this one. Hope you have an awesome day, and yeah, I'll catch you guys in the next video.